Hi everyone, welcome to eduism.com. We have with us today a very special guest, Ruchi Goel. She is a mom mentor at Eduism and she joined us a year ago. She has been supporting parents of children with hearing impairment. Ruchi is a parent of a 17-year-old who has hearing impairment, who has been mainstreamed, and she has been using speech therapy intensively. She has been mentoring parents since 16 years through her blog called Impaired and Empowered. She is here today to support parents with strategies to cope with hearing loss, speech delay, and hearing impairment. When a woman has a story to tell, it is surely one of substance. One of her stories is full of hurdles, and she overcame them with small wins, big wins. And today she's here with us to share her story and share some strategies. Thank you, Ruchi, for coming on board.
Thank you, Anita. It's been an absolute pleasure knowing you as a person and the mission that you have with Eduism. I know that very few people would actually be doing what you're doing. You believe in parents and stories which are different. So I'm very, very proud and happy that I'm with Eduism. Well, my story has been very, difficult. A special need parent will always have a very different story to tell. Each parent has a different story. And my story is also of lots of tears, lots of crying, lots of sadness, as well as victories, because it's the first 5 years which are very crucial when you have a child with disabilities or some impairment. And these are the golden years of our children. So if we find ways to support the child in that, because the child's brain is very plastic at that point in the first 5 years. So we call it the golden years. And if you are able to work with that child in those early years, you can see miracles happening. I was very lucky that Prisha, when she was born, I'm very talkative anyways, and I love children. We discovered that she was deaf when she was 10 months old. And we got her, it was really shocking. How do we help out a child with a hearing loss? Because I had never seen, I would see it on television when we were little kids, people using sign language, but I never realized that I would have a child with hearing loss, and all my singing and dancing and, talking to her was literally on deaf ears. So we started to look for answers online. But there was nothing in those days. It's way back in 2004. There was nothing much which showed us that in India we have this. And so I started to ask around if there was any school teacher or somebody who would tell me that deaf children can talk, because I was very sure that she should talk. Depression, sadness, tears, bashing up, you want to kill yourself. All these are things that happen to every child every parent who has a child with disabilities at that moment, because suddenly you feel, alone, and people also are very cautious about how they talk to you. Right. But eventually that we started to use hearing aids, and the sad part was the audiologist asked us, choose your hearing aid. And I was like, how do I know which hearing aid to choose? It's not like, bhindi or potatoes.
Yeah, but Ruchi, what age was this at, the hearing aids?
She was about 10 months old when we eventually put hearing aids, but our search was on for about 2 months because she was diagnosed at about 7 months.
So was it like a percentage? She had a hearing loss at a certain percentage, or was it all total hearing loss?
There is nothing called completely deaf. You always have residual hearing. So it depends. We have like mild, moderate, and severe to profound. So Prisha is severe to profound, where she hears at 75 to 85 dB in 1 ear, decibel in 1 ear, and the other one is 110. So if I really shout into her right ear, which is 75 to 85 dB, she can just about make out sound from no sound. And the other one, even if there's a helicopter next to her ear, she won't be able to hear it. So that's how bad the hearing loss is. So it was very stressful, and everybody was cautious. But then my husband, he started to look for the best hearing aid. And as a parent, you are thinking that why should you spend so much of money on a hearing aid? A hearing aid is a hearing aid. But then, we eventually worked out the finances, because that was also, we had just bought a house. And so, looking at a 1 lakh hearing aid is a very big amount that you're looking at. So it was very stressful time for us. Eventually, we did get her hearing aids at 10 months. My husband really did a lot of research as to what she would be hearing and whether it would be and we were very sure that we wanted the best hearing for a child.
Yeah.
We did put the hearing aids, and then we started speech therapy. Why speech therapy is important is because unless you perceive, because for the first time when she was actually wearing hearing aids, it's all sound. It's all noise. It's so noisy that and she has never heard sounds before. So for her to make out that sound is a drilling sound, that sound is a sound of my, of something falling down, or a car, she has no idea. You have to put that word, the word with that sound. You have to put it together and mash them together. So this person who's looking at me is called a mother. How will you? It's like learning a foreign language. Now, if you go and learn Japanese, for example, you will need to learn everything from scratch.
Yeah, but then there's so many resources for that, right? But for what you had to do, there were no resources as such at that time.
So, no, nothing. Even online, because we were looking online for help, there was nothing available. So we started speech therapy, and I was going to a speech therapist in Pune, and I just felt that there was something missing. I just knew it instinctively that this is not going to make my child talk. And so, and the mother, and I knew the time was running. I just wanted my daughter to talk, and she would tell me, don't put the hearing aids for very long because it may damage her hearing. And I said, why would she say something like that? So I would still, because I wanted to connect with my child, so I would just put the hearing aid and keep talking. But eventually, I started to talk, and we would attend the lessons 2 times a week. It was, I still remember, 150 rupees for 1 hour. And I just felt with this 150 rupees, actually, I could buy something and play with her at home much better. And I would think I would do a better job than what this speech therapist is doing. So I was miserable, and I would just cry. What is the future of this child? Am I going to be learning sign language? But then sign language would mean that which sign language, and whether it's possible around me, and how many people on the streets use sign language. So that was very stressful time for all of us. Right. And it was just a miracle. I still remember I was sitting in a temple one day, and I just sat down with both my children. And I cried, and I just said, God, show me a way, because I know this is not working. I need somebody to help me. And literally, if I could say, it was like in one of the Bollywood movies. Next morning, Alka ma'am called me up, and she said,
how did she get your number and stuff?
Yes, one day we were at the audiologist's place. We had to go for some fitting of her mold. Precious, the hearing aid has a mold attached to it, which goes into the ear canal, and that helps her to, the sound to reach her ears. And we were just sitting there looking very depressed. And my husband and I we would just look around. If there was somebody who was talking, we were constantly looking at people's ears. We were constantly looking at people talking, anybody who has a hearing loss. And this girl, there was this 17-year-old who was going on talking. And, she was literally like, shouting at her mother. And I just told my husband, look, she's talking and she's got hearing aids. Can you just go and ask her what happened? How did she manage it? And so my husband went to her, and this lady, the mother of this child, she said, come outside. We were very surprised. I kept sitting, and my husband went out, and she gave a number in his hand, and he said, call up this lady. She's the best. And if you can manage to do her speech therapy for 3 years, you will be done. Your daughter is sorted. But you have to handle her for 3 years. It's very difficult. So my husband said, what is difficult? What could be difficult? But for us at that moment, we weren't thinking. So we did call her up. She asked, she did talk to us, found out what was wrong. And then she said, okay, I'll arrange a class. So that's how we had her number. But she takes time, and she takes time for a reason,
Yeah.
that she wanted parents to be really desperate and wanting to do it. Because unless a parent is motivated, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So eventually next day we went to her house and I saw these 4 kids sitting on the mat and she was talking in Marathi. And I said, this old lady, what is she? Because we are always, our generation always thought that, wow, what will this old lady know? And she was in her 70s, early 70s then. But I saw all these children were talking. And she just asked me to sit with my baby on the lap and just keep listening. And I was intrigued because I said all these children were like, singing away, talking, and they were having so much fun.
Yeah.
I said, if there is one person in this world, it is this lady who will make my child talk. Because when I asked her, can I talk to these children's parents? She was very open about it. My previous therapist, I kept asking her, okay, this child has a cochlear implant. That's a better hearing aid, right? It's a surgery. So it's an implant. So the child gets better hearing than compared to mine. Give me the number. I want to talk to the parent. She would never give it to me. Because the child wasn't talking. And so if I contacted the parent probably would tell me that, no, this implant is not working.
Yeah, it became commercial.
So that's the reason. And then we started speech therapy twice a week. I would sit in Alka ma'am's class on the mat every, for the 1.5 hours. She was one of the strictest persons I have ever known after having raised 2 kids. She was very firm about her, speech therapy. It was very, very grueling, very strong on us because she would just break us down. It was literally, so it was like I was back in the army when we were being trained. But the thing was, unless you are pushed to learn something new, you won't put your passion into it. And
absolutely.
the best part was that she asked us to stay in the classroom, unlike the other therapists. And the child would be on my lap or, sitting there, but it was me who was being trained.
That's important. I think for anything, right? If the mother or the father, whoever takes over as the caregiver, I think needs to be trained as well, because it's the same thing with curriculums. If we don't know what our child is studying, that curriculum, we can't be a good support.
Absolutely. And, the parent, especially the mother, a lot of people have often asked me also, why do you always emphasize on mother? Because mother is, in those first 5 years, the mother is a primary caregiver.
Absolutely.
And so she's there all the waking hours. The emotional bond is very strong. The drive, the time the mother can give, no one else can give. So there were some mothers who said, I will hire somebody who will, probably learn from you. And then, she will do the same thing for my child. But that's just not possible. The emotions are missing. The kind of, language you are using at home, the kind of things that you do at home are different.
Okay.
Your house than mine. Your exposure to the world outside is different than mine. So the child, because the child is with the mother all the time, the mother should be aware of using that language constantly. So it's like like you learn a foreign language, the amount of recall, the amount of, drive that you have to learn that language is immense. You have to keep practicing. Now with your deaf child, you have to expose this child to all these environmental sounds. So I was basically doing this all my waking hours, all her waking hours. She would be sitting on the kitchen platform, listening to this little tuck sound of the mustard popping, or we would go to the shopping and she would be putting things in the bag and I would be telling her how to do it. We would be, we would be outside somewhere and talking about everything that we saw, everything that we heard. And then recalling this at home all the time. So telling it to daddy, telling it to dadi, telling it to dadu, telling it to her brother. So there was a lot of repetitions that we were doing.
Right.
So it was very intense. First 6 years of Prisha and me we were inseparable. I was very stern. Alka ma'am always wanted that, if I returned to a classroom, there were changes in my child.
Yeah.
So it was very intense, but so worth it.
Yeah, I can imagine that. That's support that you provided. How did you see that the similar support as a rivulet was provided by your husband and the kids? I mean, your son. So how did they support you supporting Prisha?
So initially it was very tough because, I was in a very difficult mental state, because not all therapists are as driven as I have realized, because I've been blogging about it very, very soon after, because I knew that there was so many few people who had access to such good therapy. It's called auditory verbal therapy. So I started writing about it on the blog. So each time I would, practice it at home with my family. Sometimes they couldn't understand why I was in such a bad mood, because Alka ma'am would push me so hard, and then I would be in a state of mental distress, because I'm trying to get my daughter to listen to something, and then I have to train my whole family to the same way, and they couldn't understand why would I be insisting on a certain way, because they are not there in the classroom. They don't know what it is all about. Yeah. So what I would do is, after each lesson, I would come back home, put my daughter to sleep, and then make those notes, so that I can read them and reinforce in my brain. And then I would use this with my children, with my son and my husband, and also tell my friends. And, if I had any social life, I would tell everybody that this is how you have to be asking my child. You have to slow down. Let her listen. If you're asking her a question, please wait, because most of the time people don't even wait to listen to the child, or they give a question and then they don't even wait for an answer. They just ask the next question.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So there are so many strategies that, so many things that we have to change when a child has speech delay, or has a speech impairment, or has, especially if you have hearing loss, because first of all, the child, like my daughter, I trained her without any lip reading. So I would train her in the dark, so that she's not dependent on lip reading, because not everybody is going to turn around and talk to her and, really make those big lip movements. Yeah. So Alka ma'am was like so super. She said that we have to depend least on gadgets. So my entire family was also going through the same thing. So it was hard, but eventually they all learned it. They all supported, especially my son. He was like a second dad all the time. He would insist that Prisha has to be, listening a certain way. And I think the sibling bond was very important. I made sure that she respected him and she listened to him. So she would pull his leg, or she would, sing along for him, and he would also support. So that was very important. That, in fact, the way a sibling will talk to your child, it's very different, right? The sibling bond is very different, and they're conversing in a different way. So that really helped. The whole family actually has to be supporting the child. If the mother has decided on a certain strategy, she will share it with the family, and the family has to listen, because eventually she's the one who's interacting the most. She's trying to make a difference. Now, if we don't support her, it's her lone journey, which is not fair.
True. Very true. What about, how would you say school support? Schools can support a child with hearing difficulty or hearing loss. How can they make it easy for the child to integrate in that school if it's a mainstream?
See, for example, now, for a child with how does a hearing aid work? Now, a hearing aid is a gadget. It's basically a microphone or an amplifier. Now, it amplifies all the sounds around. Now, in the classroom situation, if everybody is talking loudly, so can you imagine how loud it must be for the child to listen? So first, and in that, if the teacher is trying to talk, or somebody from the next bench is trying to talk, they won't be able to understand anything. So there has to be a lot of, when somebody's giving instructions in a classroom, there has to be a quiet environment. One person talking at a time. Plus, if not all, like my daughter can, because it's brain training, where like these first 5 years, we are really training the brain to ear is just a passage. The brain is being trained to hear, because that's where the sound perception and comprehension is happening. So in that whole environment, the child is trying to listen. Now, some children are dependent on lip reading. So the teacher also has to be turning towards the child. Now, this hearing aid also has like a 1.5 meter radius. From behind, they won't be able to, some of them can't hear. So the teacher has to be facing the child. The classroom has to be quiet. One person has to be talking, which can be challenging because children are children. They don't understand it. Awareness is one thing. Each time I moved her to a classroom, I did really try. Not all teachers were open to it. I really tried to have an awareness talk where the children understand this. Supposing they're on a field, the child won't be able to hear as much because the hearing aid cannot catch.
Cannot go beyond that area.
And in an open area, it hears differently. So the loudest pitch is picked up much more. So it spreads out. So it does the sound spread out. So it won't be as sharp for the child. So sometimes these children
it's such
really
a challenge.
Yes.
This is a challenge for her because if she's in the playground and there's a car noise outside, or the car is honking and there are 10 cars going, she's going to hear that with the hearing aid. My gosh.
So it was, and the children also, they will just say something and run away. And she said, Mama, I didn't hear anything, Mama. What did she say? And so I missed out on the playing. So the children would isolate. They won't play with her. So all these things have to be made aware. The children have to be made aware. They should have a buddy system. So you don't have like one person. This is what I have, been very vocal about, that weekly you have one buddy. So every child who buddies up with a child who has a disability or a hearing loss understands how difficult it is for this child. And then there's only not always one child who's responsible for this. Everybody gets to, empathize and sympathize and, learn the difficulties of having disability. I think this is a very good way of inclusion for these children and to build up empathy in a community. So I'm very, 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 vocal about it. And this is the reason when I started my blog, and then I moved to Facebook where I'm very active. I make these small video clips also to connect better, telling them exactly why it is so important that when you have a child with disabilities, because now my whole thing it's not only about hearing impairment. Now I'm also talking for the last few years on disabilities and, inclusion for these children.
That's what brought us together. So
yes, that all. And I think my biggest the best thing was last few years I've been talking very, very openly about it. And in Indonesia, I had got a lot of very positive response because in Asia you have more challenges compared to the Western
why is
world.
that? What do you think is the gap, and where would we need to fill that? I'm sure there's a lot. But
yes, see that the thing is, the problem is like with the hearing aids also. Now they are getting developed in the Western world. Now by the time they send out, the latest models come down to Asia, but then the programming, the technical support that is required to program them needs a lot of training, right?
Okay.
And then these people who are learn these programming are poached by other companies. So it's very, very complicated situation because in the West there are certain ethics, certain not that they are perfectly fine also there, but you have to be very, very lucky to find an audiologist who is so driven to support you. So I was looking for a hearing aid in Indonesia, for example. They were charging me so much of money, almost double, because he was, it was not, everything was not very clean the way he was providing. Plus they didn't have the enough technical support. Now in Germany, I got this audiologist who's sitting down and programming even to 1 decibel. So if she says I have vibrations there, he will sit down and do it. But in India or Asia, they are not able to do that, which is very, very sad because it needs a lot of expertise and you have to be staying there with that company for very long. So somewhere the companies are not able to hold these people. So it's about money, like, wherever they get more money, they would move. But every hearing aid is very different. And then in the West, you get the latest hearing aid, which are slowly like passed down, like, in Asia, you won't get, it's they always pass on the ones which are fading out into the south, so towards Asia and things like that. So that also plays a vital part. I'm hoping things will change. Parents are more aware.
Yeah.
That the whole idea is parents have to be on top of it. They have to be questioning, for asking, because you're paying money, right? So you should be able to ask, but we are so afraid to ask them because in my audiologist in Pune, when I asked her that why Prisha is not hearing, yesterday she was hearing, today you did something in a hearing aid, and she's yelled at me, though I was paying her, she yelled at me that, who's the audiologist? I said, because I had the, training from a very amazing mentor. She says, how do you know that she's not hearing? I said, the whole idea is she wears a hearing aid. Whatever she hears, she responds. She tells me exactly. Now, if she's not doing it, that means something is wrong with the hearing aid. So if I'm questioning you, what am I doing wrong? So we are afraid to ask because they can program incorrectly. And this is what has happened with me personally. She programmed it wrong so that my child doesn't hear, the child doesn't talk. And so I have to move to a cochlear implant. So this is another big, mess.